Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Uh, First and foremost, I want to say thank you for all my subscribers. I have just recently getting 100 or 3 subscribers, I think, so that's pretty cool. So thank you for that to all my subscribers. That means a lot to get over 100. Today I want to talk about my top 10 favorite movies. And I thought about this since my last video, and I thought, why not try to make a top 10 list and the most simple to do is a top 10 favorite movies of all time, but so I tried to make this list in the last 2 weeks, and then I realized it's pretty impossible to do because it changes all the time, and every time I try to sort of say this is it, then I think, I know, what about this movie instead? So this will not be a definitive list because tomorrow I could probably put two other films into this. But for the moment, I just say this is the movies today I would pick, because I really don't like that feeling of just putting 10 movies, because you always think about another one when you have a different mood on another time. So for now, this will just be my I don't know what the right word is, but this is a list for today. So another thing I also did when I made this list is this list will only be English speaking. What's the right word? They only speak English or American with an American accent. I can't speak today. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a bit nervous. But my point is, there isn't any non-English speaking movies on this list because I want to make another video one day which would be my top 10 favorite foreign language movies, where it could be all from French to Italian or something else, and I would try to separate them so I don't pick a non-English speaking movies on this list, so I don't repeat myself. I don't know if that makes sense, but this video will only be English speaking movies. Alright, now I try to go into the dirty works here because I like dirty things. Sorry about that. That was another subject. But I would say my number 10 here. Alright. The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola from 1974. And I was really not certain if I would choose this movie, because I was also thinking a lot about the Antonioni movie Blow Up, which have a lot of similarities, but still a very different movie comparing to this. But the thing is, you can definitely see that Francis Ford Coppola was very inspired by Blow Up, by Antonioni. If I was in the more mood for artsy stuff, I would pick Blow Up definitely over this movie, because I think actually Blow Up is a smarter movie than this. But in this day, my routine, I feel like I'm a bit more for some more creepy, sinister, thriller-ish style. So today I pick The Conversation by Coppola. The thing about Coppola is that I think he has a tendency to become sometimes a bit too pretentious when he makes movies. I think you can see that in even his most famous work, like The Godfather Part 1 and 2 and Apocalypse Now. I'm not saying they are bad movies by any means, but I just don't think... I think they're a little too hyped. I don't know what it is. I like them, don't get me wrong, they are good movies. I just don't love them. But The Conversation here, I actually think is an incredible piece of work. yeah, there are a few nitpicks I have with this movie, and that is in the movie Gene Hackman, who is this kind of expert, so how do we pronounce that? Surveillance man. I don't know how you can say that, but he listens to people's conversations. That's part of his job, and then he discovers this attempt of murdering this couple. He thinks that, and that's not the bad part of the movie. But in the movie, there's a dream sequence which I think is very pretentious. When he has this nightmarish dream about a woman, and I don't like that. That's where I think he sometimes becomes too pretentious to my taste. But otherwise, it is a very clever movie. I think it has a very good acting performances by Gene Hackman, of course, who's the real star. But also the one, what is his name? John Cassell. I don't know how you pronounce that, but the one who was also in the Godfather movies. Those two are the main highlights in terms of acting in this. It's also fun to see Harrison Ford before he became famous in a very short role, but he has a sort of important role in this. But it's fun to see him. It's a very I think it's a great movie, and I don't really have so much else to say about it. I think it's Coppola's best work. That's just my opinion. My number 9. And this is my only sort of modern movie on this list. I'm a bit more old school, you know. I just prefer old school movies. But I admit there are some great movies in the last 20 years. But the one I picked that is more modern is Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris from... when is it from? 2011, isn't it? I can't see it on this. Yes, 2011. What's his? Owen Wilson plays this Woody Allen type who is engaged to Rachel McAdams' character, and they are on a holiday in Paris with her parents, and he goes on this fairy tale-ish dream in Paris where he goes back in time and discovers his heroes in terms of literature, like Ernest Hemingway and what is the other one? I can't remember. But he discovers all the famous stuff from the 1920s, which is sort of his what's the right word? That's the period he sort of feel is the highest in terms of literature, in terms of sort of a time period he wants to live in, you know. And I really think Woody Allen have done an incredible work on this, because yes, it's a sort of a romanticized view of literature and also old Paris, but that's the point. But about it, I think Woody Allen sort of have this view that all of us people who is a bit maybe pessimist about the modern world, we always have that feeling if we could go back in time, we would discover more paradise world, a bit more romanticized world. Because when we look back, and that's why I can identify, even though I'm not an expert on old literature, but I can identify with Owen Wilson's character, because, like I said, I love old movies. Every time I watch them, I get this nostalgic feeling about a time I have never even lived in. But I just feel like when I watch them, I think the time period just seems so much sophisticated. It's a bit more like, and I also think that the time period was more, the people were more smart than they are today. I know it's very stupid of me to say that, but that's just the feeling I sometimes have. And I think that's why I can identify with Owen Wilson's character, who wants to go back to the 1920s. and also where he falls in love with another woman, played by Marion Cotillard, who's this French woman, who then, but she has a more pessimistic view of her time period, so she wants to go back to the 90s, which they eventually do. They do go back to the 1890s, but he doesn't have that feeling about that. So I think that's why I think it's a smart movie. It has a lot of thought into it, and just to also just talk about Woody Allen in general. I really like Woody Allen. I know it's maybe not the most popular thing to say in the modern time of the world, but I think he is a great comedian. He has a great sense of humor, but I don't think he has made any real masterpieces except this one. I am not a fan of Annie Hall or Manhattan. They're not necessarily bad movies, but they were I wasn't very into them, even though I've tried to give them a watch. And the thing I sometimes have with Woody Allen is that I don't like when he is in his own movies, because he has a great sense of humor, and I do like him as a sort of comedic type. But I think he sometimes he's taking the focus from the other actors. And that's probably also why I really love this movie, because he isn't in it. But even though Owen Wilson played it a bit like Woody Allen himself will probably have done if he was younger, I think Owen Wilson has a more authentic way of playing than Woody Allen. I think it's really, really funny, and also a bit moving movie, I think, and it's very smart. I would highly recommend it if you have never watched it. I think it's Woody Allen's masterpiece. Coming to my number 8, and that is Notorious, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it's a movie from 1946. That is an earlier example of a spy movie done really well. Hitchcock, of course, made more spy movies in his career, but I never think he did it as well as in this. This is an incredible, dark, but also very romantic movie, and there is really nothing. The thing about it, I've talked a bit about this before in another video I made a year ago when I did the Alfred Hitchcock ranking. The thing about it is that when I saw it the first time, I only thought it was good. The second time I saw it, I thought it was very good. And the third time I saw it, I thought, this is incredible. This is, how couldn't I see the brilliance of it the first time? Not that I necessarily thought it was a bad movie, but I just felt, I wasn't particularly invested that much in the story the first time I saw it, but but every time I've watched it since, it just becomes better and better. I think it's also a bit, how should I put it, the right words, it's a very brave movie in terms of Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant's love affair, and then they are sort of making her to sort of like a prostitute, where she has to have an affair with Claudia Rains' character, who is this Nazi sympathizer, I don't know what's the right. He was a sort of a Nazi guy. It's difficult for me to explain in my little rough English. And I just think it's really, really brave movie for the time. It was just made after the war, and I think, and I really think sometimes, like when people talk about Hitchcock, they always talk about they always talk about Psycho, Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Rear Window. And all of them I like, don't get me wrong. One of them I would pick as my favorite, that will come in the later part of the video. But it's really, I think this is a much smarter and clever movie than Psycho is. That's just my opinion, of course. But I really think if you are discovering Hitchcock for the first time, don't watch this as the first movie, but you have to give it a try more than once, because if you don't like it the first time, it will only get better on the second time and the third time and the fourth time. It is, in my opinion, a masterpiece. And I love the actors in this, and I think Claudia Rains is one of the best actors of all time. He's not very often picked as one of the greatest actors, but I think Claudia Rains was an incredible actor. Yeah. Coming up to my number 7, and that is a movie. It's a courtroom drama called Judgment at Nuremberg. Directed by Stanley Kramer, in 1961. And it's actually some years ago since I have last seen this, but I watched it a lot time period. I thought it was so incredible, well acted, so I watched it multiple times some years ago, and then I sort of had a break for it, but I still think it's one of the greatest movies of all time, and my favorite courtroom drama. It's based on, is it based on I can't remember if it was a short story. No, not, was it a play? It was based on sort of a play in the early, in the late 50s, I think, and that of course was based on the real Nuremberg courtrooms made after the Second World War, where they are not investigating, but they are speaking with these old Nazi guys. I can't, I don't know what the right words, but they are, there are, for example, Burt Lancaster, who plays, he was a Nazi, and in this movie the focus is why they did why the Nazi, what's the right word, why did they do what they did? Sometimes you see about great intelligent people following the Nazi governments at that time, and that is this movie's focus. It's a very gray movie. It's not very black and white in terms of good versus evil or villains and heroes. This is a very smart movie with real human beings making, and even though you had great talent, great intelligence, there were still people back in the days that followed the Nazi regime. And that is what I really like about this movie. It doesn't try to be necessarily have prejudice against these people who did that, even though they did horrendous things, but it's just much more complicated than that. And again, this has incredible acting performances. Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, Judy Garland, Marlene Dietrich, and how you pronounce his name, Maximilian Schell. Yeah, great talent. Montgomery Clift is also in this, and he also makes incredible performance, even though his role is very short. This is a wonderful movie. Stanley Kramer is also an incredible filmmaker. He did another courtroom drama called Inherit the Wind. I think it was 2 years earlier than this, in 1959. And he did a movie also with Spencer Tracy called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I think it was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967. It was right before Spencer Tracy died. I think he died some weeks after he finished shooting that movie, and that's also a really fun and smart comedy, I think. Stanley Kramer also did a movie called the Defiant Ones, I think, and he did On the Beach, wasn't it? Yeah, I think it was also him that made that movie. And all these movies, all these movies I talk about is very smart movies. They are very good, and they all deserve to be watched more than once. But Judgment of at Nuremberg is his greatest work, I think. Yeah. Then coming up at my number 6 is a movie from the 40s called Mrs. Miniver, yeah, directed by William Wyler, another favorite movie director of mine, and it was sort of you can call it a propaganda movie because it was made during the war, and it was sort of very like, it has this very old school. It sort of have sometimes a bit naive view at sort of the British life. You know, it's very romanticized, and the Nazis are very they are very evil. So it's a very like the heroes here are very good people and the villains are very evil people. But even though it has that sort of black and white view of human life, it is a propaganda movie, let me say that. But it has a very, very moving story to tell here. And great acting performance by Greer Garson especially, and also Walter Pidgeon. Yeah. It sort of have, it is sort of, I don't, the one, if I have a nitpick, is the title itself, because it's almost like she is the main character, but I don't think she is the main character. I think it's her whole family that's sort of the central part of this story. Her son, I can't remember the actor who played the son, but he's sort of he's going to war as a airplane fighter, and he's also engaged in this movie with this young girl who's also in the Teresa Wright, who's also in in Shadow of a Doubt, directed by Hitchcock. Great actress, by the way. Sorry about that. I didn't know what to say before, so I just had a break. Mrs. Miniver is a very romanticized movie, but it's a very, very good movie, or even a great movie. I think it is, William Wyler was an incredible Hollywood director, but he made some really powerful stuff. He did The Best Year of Our Lives, I think, after the war. He also did a great movie from the 60s, sort of more British movie called The Collector. I can't remember which year it was from, but it was from the 60s, which is a very, very dark and a bit perverse movie. So he was really good at exploring different genres. But he always had really great acting performances in them, and he usually choose to make some very sort of, he has great drama in them, even though some of them can be a bit romanticized by the you will probably feel that as a modern audience. But Mrs. Miniver, maybe I'm a bit too biased about it, maybe it isn't as great as other people think, but I really, really love this movie. So yeah. Coming at number 5 is Chinatown, directed by Roman Polanski. And that is sort of a neo-noir drama from 1974. It's a very disturbing movie where Jack Nicholson played this private investigator who discovers sort of very dark secrets about the sort of more the powerful elite in Los Angeles. I don't want to talk too much about the details, but he discovers some nasty stuff, and he also has this affair to Faye Dunaway's character, which is very sort of interesting. It's a bit, it's really a bit, it has some very many similarities to the old 40s film noir, where you sort of where the private investigator falls in love with this femme fatale, and then everything goes wrong in the end because the femme fatale is not a good good person. But in this, it is sort of twisted a bit. It's not going exactly how you expect it to go, even though it has many similarities to the old film noirs from the 40s. I think Roman Polanski is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. That is probably a bit controversial to say by the modern standards. It's not that I necessarily will defend him as a person, what he has done, but if you look at his filmography, he has done incredible amount of good work, a lot of different stuff. The thing about it, a lot of people nowadays, the modern movie directors or people, they always talk about, the great ones, Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, two really good directors, don't get me wrong. But I don't think they are exploring as many genres and more disturbing sides of humanity as Polanski does. I think Polanski understands the complications of the human lives much more than some other filmmaker does, and he's very good at exploring them no matter what genre he does, even if it's a horror movie, if it's a noir, if it's a more thrillerish, or even some of his more recent one when he did some war movies. Even there he explores some deep stuff, and I think it's not everything I like about Polanski, but I think he's still one of the great directors of all time. He could do a lot of different things, but Chinatown is his best American work, but I'm not sure it's his greatest work actually. That's topic for another video I want to make one day. But Chinatown is probably, it is my favorite movie from the 70s. It's really a masterpiece, I think. Coming up as number 4, that is an old film noir, and I couldn't be more excited to talk about Sunset Boulevard, directed by Billy Wilder. That is actually a movie that I haven't seen for some years also, but I did watch it a lot when I was sort of a teenager. That was sort of the movie that he had a lot of great stuff, and I was so excited to see it when I saw it, I was like, whoa, this is incredible, I have to watch it again, and then I don't know how many times I watched it back in the days, but I did watch it a lot. And now there's been some years, but I still rank it as probably, it is my favorite sort of film noir of all time. It has this, William Holden plays this script writer who sort of goes to this old house where he discovers this former silent actress called, which name was Norma Desmond, and he starts having this very awkward relationship to her. But they also have a mutual respect for each other, even though it doesn't go. How should I say this without spoiling it? It doesn't go well for any of them in the end. That's the most I will spoil for this movie. But let me say this about Billy Wilder in general. A lot of people rank him as one of the great directors of all time, sort of, or maybe the greatest writer-director of all time. I have to say I disagree a bit about that. The thing about Billy Wilder is that I really admire him a lot. I think he has done some great works for old cinema. But I think some of his movies has a tendency to become a bit too long and a bit too ordinary in the end. For example, Double Indemnity from the 40s. That is an alright movie in my opinion. But I think the ending I don't think it's as great as people rank it. I think there's many other film noirs from the 40s much better than Double Indemnity. I think it starts off pretty well, Double Indemnity, but it becomes sort of like predictable and sort of it just goes as you know as you think it will go. So I don't think it is as smart as other people think, but it's a decent movie. Don't get me wrong. He also did some other movies. He did many movies actually. Sabrina and the Agatha Christie courtroom. What's called The Witness for Prostitution. He also did some in the 60s, and he did the 7-Year Itch. You know, I'm not saying these are bad movies, but I find them too long, and I don't know exactly if I understand what he wants to say. It's as you know, some it's not that the movie has to say something, a meaningful message, but I don't understand what was the purpose for the movie. It's just sometimes you don't feel anything when you have watched it, even though it's a competent made movie. But Sunset Boulevard is where he is at his finest, because what I like about Billy Wilder is when he's at his most satirical, where he makes fun of the human lives in general. Here he makes fun of all the Hollywood elites, and it was very controversial in Hollywood back in the days, and I think a lot of the producers and sort of, they really disliked this move and wanted to boycott it or something like that. But of course it was so great, so it couldn't be hidden. This was a powerful movie even back in the days. I can't remember how great reviews it got back in the days, but it's really like it's difficult not to like Sunset Boulevard if you like film noirs. And that's, but again, back to my point, is Sunset Boulevard is very satirical, also about Hollywood, but also about sort of the film noir genre in general. Sort of like, even for the beginning, you understand, you know how the movie will end in some ways, and in some ways it's a bit, it sort of spoils the whole movie, but the way Billy Wilder tells the story in this is very unique, I think, and you becomes very captivated by the characters. Some other movies by Billy Wilder I really like is the one he made with Kirk Douglas. Is it Ace in the Hole? Ace, I don't know how you pronounce it, but the one he made with Kirk Douglas the year after Sunset Boulevard. That's also a very satirical movie, a very powerful movie also. Of course, there's Some Like It Hot, which is a very good comedy. I don't think it's his greatest work, but I think it is a very good movie. And of course, The Apartment, which is also a bit satirical. So every time he explored the more satirical essence of when he makes fun of human lives in general, that's where he is at his best. But Sunset Boulevard is his only masterpiece in my opinion. I really love this movie, and I have to give it a watch very soon, I think, because it has great performances and has a great story to tell. Yeah. Coming at my number 3 is I think the only British movie I have on this. Yeah, I think so. Brief Encounter, directed by David Lean from 1945. This is probably the greatest. You think about it. I think it's one of the most perfect movies ever made in terms of, there's nothing really you can say about it that has to be changed. It's so perfect in its essence of the sort of this love story that they can't end up together. So I think the way the story is very simple. It's a very simple story. You have seen this example many times afterwards, but the way David Lean makes it it's so moving. And the actors by what's the word, the actors Trevor Howard and Cecilia Johnson, they are incredible. They have such great chemistry. What I really like about this is that it doesn't judge the main actors. The characters, their love affair, even though they are married. It is not a movie that says this is wrong by what you do. This is a movie about sadness and about but also just love in general, and how you easily, even though you live probably a good life with a good family, you can easily fall in love again. And that's, I think, just the message of this movie is that people, this is just human beings who fall in love even though they are married. It's not, it's a sad story, but it's, I think, very authentic. Sure, it is romanticized a bit about their affair and how they sort of meets every Thursday, I think. But the way I think the storytelling here is very authentic. It's a really powerful and moving movie. And even though David Lean has made lots of great movies, I think Brief Encounter is his greatest work. Alright. Coming at my number 2 is The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, directed by Sergio Leone from 1966. You know, the thing about Sergio Leone is that he didn't make a lot of movies, but many of them became very iconic. His Dollar Trilogy and Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America. I think, what should I say? Sergio Leone's two first, like A Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More, they are sort of exploring earlier ideas that will be perfected in this movie. The first two are okay. And the first one I'm not so keen on, but the second one is a bit better. And this one is just, it's a very, really epic and fun and thrilling and also a bit sad movie. I sometimes you don't, it's a very good, it has good character arcs from all the characters, you know, Blondie, Tuco and Angel Eyes. Even though it's a pretty straightforward Western in terms of the narrative, it's still very engaging, and you sort of still root. Every time I watch it, I sort of get a kick out of what's going to happen next. It has this, you know, it's a very, very entertaining movie. And I'm not necessarily a big Western fan, but this is just like, yeah, man, this is great. I just want them to shoot at each other and yeah. This is, but Sergio Leone was also very a patient director. He took his time to tell his stories, which is, I think, it was a brave thing. But he was still, I think, aware that there has to be momentum, there has to be a good pace, and I think The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is his best work in terms of his pace, because even though it's a long movie, it goes, it just goes, and then you feel it's already over. And I think this movie could actually be longer, in my opinion. And I absolutely adore it. I absolutely adore the score by Ennio Morricone. I hear that very often. I think it is, yeah, the greatest Western of all time. I think it's before I started making this video, I looked at the IMDb of the 10 best movies there, and I think this was the only one that on my list that's on IMDb's top 10 list. It was on the number 10 there, I think, and that also says something about this movie. It's a classicer, but I also think many people, even by modern standards, will really love this movie if they give it a watch. So my number 2 is The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. A really, really great movie. Yeah. Now my number 1, and it's difficult to once again explain why you love them. It's sometimes it's more easy to be critical, but when you sort of when it's movies you just love, I found it difficult to explain why, actually, because I can't say some bad stuff about them, even though you probably already could find a nitpick in them. But Rear Window, directed by Hitchcock from 1954, is my favorite movie of all time. I always say that, you can definitely, is it the greatest movie of all time just in general, objectively? Probably not, because you could definitely find some movies that has some better stories, probably better acting, better is more well made. But I still think Rear Window is a sort of a movie going experience that is it's sort of a movie about a movie. Not necessarily that there's a movie in the movie, but what I want to say is that James Stewart is watching other people's lives as we watch when we watch movies. We see other people's life being portrayed, and we are sort of observing that as a voyeur, or what you call it. Not necessarily voyeur, but the thing is, we are curious about other humans' lives. I think all people are in some ways, even the ones who don't care about humanity. I think everyone is a bit interested in human lives. And Rear Window explore that perfectly, I think. I don't watch Rear Window as a thriller, as some other people probably would. I watch it more about people, what's the right word? People exploring human lives. James Stewart can't get out of he can't walk because of his injury. So he wants to understand his neighbors around the other apartments. And he sort of starts have this feeling that maybe one of them is murdered. And when he said that to his friends and his girlfriend played by Grace Kelly, they are very suspicious about what he does and why he sort of says that. But as the movie progresses, they become more aware of, or maybe he has a point. But the thing about Rear Window is that we are following James Stewart's perspective, just his perspective primarily. So we see and we think what he thinks. And that's why I think it's smart. It's the most perfect example of sort of a subjective point of view. I think in any movies I've ever seen, I think it's so smart, even though it's a very simple story. But it's so perfectly done, and I think it's also one of the most perfectly example of sort of using the use of background characters, because all the human lives in the apartments, you don't see them, you don't necessarily hear them speak to each other, or sort of, but you see them, you observe them like James Stewart, and you sort of see some progress. You see their lives, and you see their difficulties, and you also see how they changes, even though they have so small roles or parts, what you call it. There's Miss Lonely Heart, who just wants love in her life, and even though she goes on a date with this man, it doesn't go as she wants it. And then there's the piano player who plays the melody all the time, and he can't sort of get what's the word? He can't make it as he wants it. But that melody that ends up sort of saving Miss Lonely Heart's life, and that's a movie itself. It's sort of a short movie in the it's a movie in the movie, like I said before, and I think it's so smart. And there's also the dancer that you know who I'm talking about if you've watched the movie. And there's the couple who is just getting married, and there's of course the guy who James Stewart thinks has murdered his wife. So there's so many characters. There's also the people with the dog, and yeah, it's the best example of sort of background characters I've seen in a movie before, and sort of the use of subjective point of view. And in itself, it's also a love story between Grace Kelly and James Stewart. James Stewart thinks that Grace Kelly is too perfect for him, and there's sort of a naive thing to say, but in some ways you understand him. Again, because you are following his sort of how he sees her, and she is perfect. She is everything what every man wants, and he thinks, why choose me? You can go find another man, And he's a bit pessimistic, maybe a bit like Hitchcock about sort of the people in general, and he has really many prejudices against them, but he evolves too as a human being. He discovers that the love he has for Grace Kelly is worth fighting for. Their relationship is worth it, even though they're very different human beings. And the fun thing again about Rear Window is that, and I don't think many people says this, but I think it's a very moving movie. I'm always a bit touched when I watched it. I don't know what it is. That's of course the Miss Lonely Hearts story, but that's also in the end, without spoiling anything, but there's sort of a resolution to all the different people in it, but it's sort of still, and yet, how should I say this, and the way that is handled, I think, is very moving. I can't explain what it is, but there's also something about the melody, the score. I think it was Franz Waxman, is it the composer who also actually did Sunset Boulevard score, I think. He made a really, really great tune, a very sort of beautiful love theme, and that is played during the movie, and in the end that tune is perfected, it's finished, and it sort of plays over the end when you sort of see Grace Kelly and James Stewart again, and the movie ends with, I don't know, I hope I haven't spoiled this movie too much, but the way that is made, I think that is very moving for me. I don't know why. I think Hitchcock could be, even though you always think about him as a sort of a thrill, the man who made suspense and thrillers, I think he could sort of made some stuff that could be quite moving actually. And for me, Rear Window is a moving movie. I love it to pieces. I think, yeah, I absolutely adore it. I don't have much more to say now. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I was a bit, again, I'm not so used to speak English, so sorry if I'm repeating myself or a little difficult to speak proper English. Sometimes when I make these videos, I always regret something. I regret, why didn't I say this, or why can't I speak more clear about what I want to say. Maybe I should make a script, but I don't want to make scripts. This is just to speak from my heart to you guys. So I will make more of this stuff, and so yeah, I hope you will all have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye.